Most men don't suffer because life is hard. They suffer because they won't stop thinking about life. They replay conversations that are already over. They imagine outcomes that haven't happened. They fight battles that exist only in their head. By the time anything real shows up, they're already exhausted. The Stoics understood this kind of suffering well. They didn't call it weakness. They didn't call it failure. They understood it as something far more dangerous. Self-inflicted pain. Pain created not by circumstances, but by the mind refusing to release what it cannot command. Today, this shows up as overthinking, endless mental loops, constant internal debates, the feeling that if you just think a little longer, you'll finally feel ready. But overthinking is not preparation. It is hesitation wearing the mask of intelligence. Men overthink before sending the message, before starting the business, before leaving the relationship they already know is over. Before committing to discipline, they tell themselves they're being careful, responsible, strategic. The Stoics would tell them something colder and far more accurate. You are trying to control what is not yours. There is one Stoic principle that sits at the foundation of all mental strength. It is brutally simple, and because of that, most men resist it. Some things are up to you, some things are not. That is not philosophy. That is a sorting mechanism. Every thought you have belongs in one of those two categories. And the moment you confuse them, the mind turns against itself. Overthinking begins the instant you demand certainty from life. You want to know how it will turn out, how people will react, whether it will be worth it, whether you'll regret it. But none of those answers are available to you. So the mind spins, not because it's weak, but because it's being misused. The Stoics did not try to eliminate uncertainty. They trained themselves to ignore it. Here is the rule that ends overthinking instantly. If it is not fully within your control, you do not give it mental space. Not later. Not after a few more thoughts. Immediately, you ask one question. Is this mine to control? If the answer is no, the thinking stops. Not emotionally, not gradually, decisively. This is where most men fail, because overthinking provides comfort. It gives the illusion of control. Letting go feels reckless, unsafe. But Stoicism is not about comfort. It is about clarity. You control your actions, your effort, your preparation, your discipline, your response. You do not control outcomes. Other people, timing, recognition, approval. Most men reverse this. They obsess over outcomes and neglect their actions. And that inversion creates anxiety, paralysis, self-doubt. When you correct it, the noise begins to die. Think about work. You want to start something new, a business, a project, a shift in direction. Your mind immediately asks questions that feel important, but lead nowhere. What if it fails? What if no one cares? What if I embarrass myself? None of those questions require action. They only demand reassurance. The Stoic response is simple. That is not mine. What is yours? Is the work today, the first step, the effort, the repetition, the discipline to show up again tomorrow. Once the action is clear, everything else is dismissed. Overthinking survives on ambiguity. Stoicism destroys ambiguity. It draws a hard line between responsibility and noise, and you do not negotiate with noise. You discard it. Modern culture tells men to explore every thought, analyze every feeling, and process everything endlessly. The Stoics took a harder path. Examine the thought. Ask whether it leads to action. If it does not, remove it. They were not emotionally numb. They were mentally disciplined. They understood that attention is finite, and where you place it shapes who you become. Overthinking feels active, but it is passive. It allows you to avoid exposure while pretending to prepare. Stoicism removes that escape. It asks one thing of you: act on what is yours, release what is not. That is where mental strength begins. Look at how this shows up in relationships. You send a message, then you wait, minutes pass, hours pass, and the mind begins to spiral. Did I say the wrong thing? Did I come on too strong? Are they losing interest? Should I follow up? Should I explain myself? Ask the Stoic question: is their response under my control? No. Then the thinking ends. Not because it feels good, but because it is pointless. What remains is what is yours: your dignity, your self-respect, your restraint, your next action. Overthinking in relationships is rarely about love. It is fear disguised as analysis. Fear of rejection, fear of loss, fear of being alone. Stoicism strips the disguise away. It does not soothe the fear, it exposes it, and once exposed, it loses its power. This rule applies everywhere, especially where emotion is strongest. Money, status, reputation. You worry about how you're perceived, how fast you're progressing, whether you're behind, whether others are doing better than you. None of that belongs to you. Comparison is not action. It is distraction. The Stoics understood this deeply. They did not measure themselves by results. They measured themselves by conduct. Did I act with discipline? Did I do what was required? Did I uphold my standards? That was the scorecard. Everything else was noise. Modern men are drowning in noise, metrics, opinions, predictions, endless commentary. And then they wonder why they feel mentally weak. Strength cannot grow in chaos. It grows in order. This rule restores order instantly. It forces the mind back into its proper role, to serve action, not replace it. This is why the rule feels harsh, because it removes escape routes. You can no longer hide in thought. You can no longer delay behind analysis. You either act or you release. There is no third option. Most men want peace without responsibility. The Stoics offered peace through responsibility. That is the trade, and it is non-negotiable. You do not calm the mind by comforting it. You calm it by giving it clear orders. Do what is yours. Release what is not. That command alone ends most anxiety, because anxiety feeds on ambiguity, and ambiguity cannot survive clarity. Think about discipline. You plan to train, to eat better, to stop a habit, and the mind immediately negotiates. What if I start tomorrow? What if I fail again? What if I don't have the energy? Those are not obstacles. They are excuses seeking permission. The Stoic response is the same. Is the effort within my control? Yes. Then act. Not perfectly, not forever, now. Discipline is not built by confidence. It is built by repetition. And repetition requires silence in the mind. This rule creates that silence, not by force, but by focus. When the mind knows its role, it stops rebelling. When it understands it is not responsible for outcomes, it stops panicking. This is why Stoicism works. Not because it feels good, but because it is accurate. Reality does not care about your worries. It responds only to action. The sooner a man accepts this, the calmer he becomes. Not passive, calm, grounded, clear, and clarity is power. Most men believe overthinking makes them safer. It does the opposite. It keeps them stuck. It delays action. It erodes confidence. And it slowly teaches the mind that avoidance is acceptable. The Stoics saw this clearly. They knew the mind must be trained, not indulged. A mind without boundaries will turn against its owner. This is why the rule is so strict. There is no negotiation, no emotional debate. You either act on what is yours, or you release what is not. That line is where strength is forged. You do not defeat overthinking by thinking better. You defeat it by thinking less and acting more. Action grounds the mind in reality. It removes fantasy. It removes fear. It removes imagined futures and replaces them with facts. The Stoics understood that peace does not come from certainty. It comes from alignment, from knowing you did your part, regardless of outcome. This is why they slept well. Not because life was easy, but because their conscience was clear. They did not carry tomorrow into today. They handled what was in front of them and let the rest go. This is the discipline modern men lack. Not motivation, not confidence, structure. Structure for the mind, a rule that cannot be argued with, a standard that does not bend to mood. This rule is that structure, and once applied, the mind begins to quiet itself, not because it is forced, but because it is relieved. Relieved of responsibility it was never meant to carry. You were never meant to manage outcomes. You were meant to manage yourself. That distinction changes everything. It removes blame. It removes fear. It removes resentment, because you no longer expect control where none exists. This is why Stoicism endures, not as philosophy, but as training. Training for the moments when the mind wants to spiral. Training for pressure. Training for uncertainty. When the next wave of overthinking comes, and it will, do not argue with it. Do not analyze it. Do not try to soothe it. Ask the question, is this mine to control? If yes, act. If no, release it. That decision alone, repeated daily, is enough to rebuild mental strength. Not slowly, not dramatically, but permanently. The mind learns what is expected of it, and it adapts. Just like the body, just like discipline, just like character, this is the work, unseen, unglamorous, relentless. And it is what separates calm men from anxious ones, strong men from fragile ones, grounded men from reactive ones. You do not need to control life. You need to meet it properly, with action, with restraint, with clarity. That is Stoic strength, and it is available to you right now through one rule, applied without compromise.